welcome to the two-man wall. Neil Lennon's agony and anguish in Glasgow is finally over with the news that he has departed the club this morning. And Star Sports quick off the blocks with a market on who will replace him. Frank Lampard could be one of the leading fancies there. And what if he joined the man Stevie G in Glasgow? We're going to get to all that later. My team, Galway United, have just resumed pre-season training and won 1-0 behind closed doors against Finn Harps the other night. But what about the mighty Whites? Adam Russell, your beloved Bolton, 5 wins on the bounce. You backed them at 8-1 to be promoted yesterday. I'm now looking at the League Two table, and Bolton are on 44 points. They're only 6 points off third, not to mention the playoffs. You must be getting excited much.
Oh, I am getting a bit excited, to be fair, Johnny. I messaged you yesterday because, I'm all about the value. And I saw it at 8-1 yesterday on Bolton to be promoted. We'd won 4 out of 5. We played Scunthorpe last night, controlled the game, passed the ball around really well, and it felt like we could have beat them 4 or 5. Someone is due a spanking off the Whites soon. So I backed us in at 8-1 yesterday. Since that win last night, it's come into 11-2 for us to be promoted this season. Now, like you say, 1 point off the playoffs. We're the informed team in the division, unbeaten in 6, 5 wins during that period. 6 points off the automatic promotion spots. It's a very tight league in League Two. I wouldn't say there's, including us, by the way, I wouldn't say there's an outstanding team in that league.
Well, I have to say, Adam, I've neglected to kind of visit the table for the last while, and the top 10 teams. What an eclectic mix of teams we have at the top. Cambridge United, Forest Green, Cheltenham, Morecambe are 4th, Tranmere are 5th, Exeter and Salford, then Newport, Bolton and Carlisle. Like, what a collection of former greats, like teams that shouldn't really be there at all, but have found themselves there. Morecambe, who always somehow manage not to go down, are on the cusp of being promoted to League One. It's just such a pity there aren't people watching this drama unfold.
Very close league. Before you even look in the bottom half of the table, you've got the likes of Bradford, Leyton Orient, Walsall, Oldham Athletic, big football clubs. Like, these are not, League Two football clubs. Some of these are big football clubs, and it's very tight. And it's one of those leagues anyone can beat anyone. So I think the key and Bolton is going on a strong run and winning consistently and putting together those periods where you pick up 15, 20 points in clusters rather than, I don't think there's going to be a team that are going to go and kind of blow everyone else out of the water. So yeah, very interesting in League Two. And I still think even at 11-2, it's worth backing Bolton to get promoted this season. Yeah,
good, fair shout. I know sometimes people will accuse you of, that's like, bias of following your own team, but sometimes I see that as a positive. You actually kind of guess, you get an insight into your team and how confident you are that, like, that team is actually progressing. And 11-2 in such a tight division, considering where Bolton have come from, is very interesting. You did want to mention Villa banning their players from playing fantasy football league. I mean, where is this world going in this horrible? Is this even woke culture? Or is it just downright madness?
I think it's bad from the players, really. They're only damaging themselves, really. It sounds like there's been a leak around, allegedly been a leak around Grealish's injury this week, and some of his pals at other Premier League clubs being informed in advance that he won't be fit for the game to make sure that they didn't have him in their fantasy Premier League team.
What a world.
How childish is that when you're playing in the Premier League, you're on thousands and thousands of pounds every week, and you
unbelievable
about losing a couple of points in the fantasy league. It's unless I suppose they've probably got some big wages on those fantasy leagues, or the winner probably gets a decent amount of money compared to my league where we all put a fiver in and whoever wins at the end of the season picks it up. But yeah, it's just that's all that needs to be said, really. It's just embarrassing, really, isn't it, for the clubs and the players?
It's embarrassing. We did mention this on Trader Chat. You can watch as well with Flynn Goward on Monday. Just this the market for the England midfield hopefuls, and Grealish, who I actually had a debate with my mates there recently where I think Grealish is one of the best players in the world. I honestly think he's that good. He's so good. I was kind of mocked for that, maybe rightly so. But in any event, his worth to Villa will be tested because he's out for about 4 weeks now. And we will get to an interesting match between Leeds and Aston Villa because of a little bet with a mate on which of them would finish top this season. But this brings Maddison and Barnes into it in the England midfield hopefuls market, which you might explain now, and also kind of advertises actually the quality that Gareth Southgate has when you talk about Foden as well in terms of these young England midfield players.
Yeah, so let me explain the market first. It's a points-based market. So there's a point for a goal, point for an assist, and a point for a clean sheet as long as you've played 60 minutes or more during that game. Grealish is at the top of that market at the minute with 30 points, and he's 4 to 5 to be leading that market at the end of the season. What's been interesting is James Maddison obviously started the season quite slowly, had a few injuries, and he's now really starting to catch up to Grealish. He's second favourite at 5 to 2. With 24 points, followed closely by Harvey Barnes, who's been in really great form, scored a couple of goals in his last 2 games. He's back at 11 to 1 to win that market, so a bit of an outside shot. And yeah, Phil Foden, 17 points so far, he's 12 to 1 back in 4th place. I do think it's a really interesting market just because, like you say, the quality that England have got at the disposal. Now, I was saying to you about we have all the, finally, for decades we've been crying out for these attacking midfielders who are able to open up defenses and are technically brilliant and take the ball in tight areas. And now we've got 5, and it seems Southgate is still sticking with a 3-4-3, 3-5-2. So arguably there's at least these 4 players competing for one spot in the team, maybe not even one spot in the team, because if he plays Henderson and other as a holding midfielder in that 3, as he's done in the past, then there's actually really only one space for a luxury player. You've got to think about, Kane's going to play, Sterling's going to play. So there actually isn't that much space for these players in the system that we think Southgate will play. So it might be key for a Grealish or a Maddison, if they are going to play in the Euros, to really make an impact this season with goals and assists, and kind of not really give Southgate much of a choice when it comes to the summer. The way Grealish is playing, like you say, I don't think you're ridiculous to say that he's up there with one of the best players in the world by any means. He's not playing in a great side, but you could see the difference in Villa at the weekend without him. They just don't have that same spark without him.
And on that, you should never, ever, ever drink and bet. Never drink and bet. But anyway, back during the kind of brief interlude in this year-long lockdown or whatever it is, where we could go to the bar in Dublin, which I think only lasts for a few weeks, but I had a few pints with a couple of mates before the start of the season, and I felt that I was getting the upper hand in the old sobriety stakes. One of them, who's a big Villa fan, had a monkey with me that they'd finish ahead of Leeds this season at even money, which I thought was outrageous value at the time. I practically decided what I was going to do with the money. But lo and behold, Villa have had the upper hand over Leeds. But Leeds play Villa on Saturday, which is a 5:30 kickoff. Obviously, as you mentioned, without Grealish. That's one of the fascinating games we'll talk about in 2 or 3 minutes. But before that, let's get to the Celtic market. The Lennon thing has honestly been looking, it's been like watching a car crash in slow motion, hasn't it, really? And it's kind of good that he's out of his misery. This is a really fascinating market. And fair play to the Star Sports traders for coming up with it at relatively short notice. John Kennedy, who's been obviously assistant, 6 to 5. Eddie Howe, who's kind of always been mentioned as a potential replacement for Lennon, 3s. Roberto Martinez probably rocks up in a lot of these markets, 6 to 1. Steve Clark, who's maybe slightly forgotten at this stage, but obviously the former Scottish manager, 13 to 2. Lampard, who needs a job or is out of a job, 8 to 1. Rafa Benitez, what an appointment he would be, 10 to 1. 20 to 1, one of their former players in Roy Keane. This is a fascinating market, Adam.
Yeah, some really interesting names on this one. I've got to say, the first one that jumped out at me as who I sort of, where my gut instinct was Eddie Howe.
Same.
And I think
would he take the job?
Yeah, he would, wouldn't he? He'd be mad not to, I think. He fits that sort of model of, as they did with Rodgers, where he's obviously a good coach and he's obviously done it at the Premier League level, but maybe just needed a bit of a career rejuvenation.
Yeah.
Especially the chance to go to Celtic and win some major silverware, even if people say, okay, well, it's only a 2-team league or whatever, the chance to win some major silverware is always going to be a massive lure to managers. And you see how well it worked out for Rodgers, now doing a fantastic job at Leicester. I think it'd be a great opportunity for somebody like Eddie Howe. And at 3 to 1, I think it's reasonable value. With John Kennedy, obviously, he's got the interim role. Sometimes that plays in your favour and sometimes it doesn't. I think particularly because he's been there all season, it's kind of, is it going to be the same voice? Maybe the players need a fresh voice from outside that Lennon camp to come in and just change the energy, change the mood around the training ground, and something a bit different. Eddie Howe's interesting at 3-1. Obviously, the prospect of Lampard against Gerrard in the Old Firm as managers is pretty appetizing as well. Whether that'll be particularly appetizing to the Celtic board, maybe not. But I think at 8-1, it's certainly interesting. Like you say, he's out of a job. It's a big club. It's something that you think Lampard, he's going to want a big job, and it fits that bill. So I think he's another interesting one. You wouldn't discount Sean Maloney though at 16. He's an interesting one. And Roy Keane at 20s. You just said that he's not had a first team manager's job in over a decade now. Maybe he's done with it. Maybe Celtic is the job that kind of lures him back in. But I could see them going for Roy Keane because he's similar to Lennon in that sense that he's unapologetic, he's direct, he's not going to take any rubbish from the players. But yeah, not too much as a Bolton fan, not too much sympathy for Neil Lennon.
Yeah,
that's on the card for a while. Who do you think though? I think
that's fair enough. I see. I guess the important thing about this market is must take charge of 10 competitive matches, which obviously brings Kennedy into it because there may not be a rush at this stage to jump into getting a new manager. I think Eddie Howe would probably fit the bill to some extent. Lampard's a hard one to call because his next job is the second album is very important, particularly if the first one didn't go very well. And as much as I think he was very magnanimous,
you could say Derby was the first album.
Sorry, yeah, that's fair. So it's the third album. I suppose
the second album.
Yeah, the second album was probably his big job. But in fairness, after Chelsea, he was quite magnanimous. I think he carried himself well in terms of the departure, and he has a long career ahead of him. And I think you have to reserve judgment on Frank Lampard. Roy Keane, I think, is probably a bit fanciful at this stage.
Mark Hughes as well. I think he's been out of work for a while. Obviously, a very well respected football man. Done it consistently at Premier League level at multiple clubs. So I think if you were Celtic, you'd be wrong to turn your nose up at someone like Mark Hughes, who gave him the due to the end of the season. And you say, let's take stock at the end of the season. I think you could do a lot worse than Mark Hughes.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to monitor the market. That market is a virtual certainty to, if ever there's insider trading, basically, this market is not so much based on a hunch. It's based on what your mates are telling you, or your mates of mates of mates are telling you, like Jack Grealish and the boys playing fantasy football or whatever. So keep an eye out on that market because these are necessarily volatile markets. But kudos to the traders coming up with something. It's a lot easier to price a match like, say, Leicester and Arsenal, 12 p.m. on Sunday. Or before that, will we talk about Manchester United-Chelsea? It's obviously the big game. That's 4:30 p.m. Sunday game. Interesting times for Chelsea, obviously. The managerial change has worked immediately well. Unbelievable goal from Giroud last night, and they face a Manchester United team that hasn't entirely given up, at least publicly, on winning the title. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, like I say, last night was a really good result for Chelsea in the Champions League against Atletico Madrid, and it was a deserved result. They controlled the game. What I found particularly interesting about this Tuchel side is the way that they are. They're so sparing in possession. They don't give the ball away, especially when they take the lead in games. It's almost like the opposition can't score if we've got the ball, and it's very possession orientated, which works to a certain extent. I worry if you put a bit of a low block in against them and you make it really difficult for them to get around your centre backs where that threat comes from. But equally, if you're not going to concede many goals, which I think since Tuchel came in, I think they've only conceded 2 goals in all competitions. So, if you're not conceding goals, as we've seen with Man City this season, that you'll win a lot of games. So, it's been impressive for them. I think he needs to get those front players firing a bit. We need to start seeing some more output because they've got such a wealth of attacking quality in that squad, Chelsea, that it's almost a shame to see them winning games 1-0 and a few shots on target. But yeah, another interesting game on Sunday, 4:30 kickoff.
The pricing is interesting here because Chelsea are 6 points behind Manchester United after 25 games this season. Now, I think people will reflect on the fact that if you're going on the quality of these teams at the moment, it's a lot closer. But the traders have actually made Chelsea, fairly strong favourites here at 5-4. I honestly don't think home advantage matters at all at the moment. 5-4, 23-10 Man United, to me,
You
is a
say that,
tempting price.
you say home advantage doesn't matter. I was saying United are actually the only Premier League team that haven't lost away from home this season, which I think is fairly significant.
There's probably still a psychological thing in that we'll set up a slightly different way in an away game, even though whether there's any logic to this. You're playing on a pitch that's basically on the horizontal plane. It's the same pitch as you get in Old Trafford. It's the same temperature. It's the same altitude. There's nobody at the match. It shouldn't make any reason whatsoever apart from some slight psychological variance. But I'm interested in that 23-10 price. Manchester United are still going for it. They're not home and hose in the top four either yet, so it's a big game for them.
The market's obviously going with form. Chelsea, like you said, had a massive upturn in form since Tuchel arrived, and United have kind of stagnated a bit in recent weeks. They put together a good run in December and January when they've kind of tailed off a bit. So I see why the market is favouring Chelsea at this point. I think particularly after the result last night, because I wouldn't say they even played their strongest 11 at Atletico last night, and they controlled the game. So it's now giving him the ability to bring in fresh legs at the weekend against United. So I can see why the market's favouring them.
You have an interesting one here. United to win, both teams score, and Bruno Fernandes anytime at 10-1. If you want kind of a speculative play on the match,
I picked that 1-1 was where my head was at with this the whole time. I think it's going to be. It could be a draw. I think it's going to be a tight game. I think Chelsea again will set up to not lose the game. You'd argue that a draw is probably a better result for them than United at the minute, given that, like you say, United will still have some faint hopes of putting together a title run. So I couldn't escape the 1-1. That was what I kept going back to. That's 11-2 at the minute. But if I had to pick a winner, like you say, I think United could edge it. I think the amount of penalties they get with, Rashford and Martial and people like that, the players like that, they get in the box and they commit defenders and they make them make challenges. So I feel like it could be a penalty, could be the difference in it. So I've gone United to win, both teams to score, and Bruno anytime, which is 10-1. It's a good price, especially, like I say, especially if it comes down to a set piece.
And Leicester playing Arsenal as well. That's 12 o'clock on Sunday. Arsenal, if they have any chance of finishing the top four, it's pretty optimistic, but they do need to put a run of results together. And Leicester are one of those teams obviously ahead of them. Leicester are in an interesting position, Adam, because they've been really impressive and they've held on in there, but they're looking over their shoulder at Chelsea. And obviously if Liverpool have a bit of resurgence, they're going to be vulnerable. West Ham have had an unbelievable season. They're fourth. And this is a fascinating game as well, has to be said. 7-5 Leicester, 15-8 Arsenal, 12-5 the draw. Tough one for me to call.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tough one to call. I think when I was looking through this one and trying to pull out some bets, I thought what was interesting to me is normally what you associate with Leicester is really good home form. Make the King Power a very difficult place to go. I think obviously you think about the Premier League winning side, but also last year they had great home form and they make the King Power a really difficult place to go. This year though, it's actually been the opposite. They've got the second best away record in the Premier League, and they've lost 5 at home this season compared to just 1 on the road. So I do think there's something in, like you've obviously mentioned, the psychological effects of not having fans. I do think that's had an impact on Leicester's home form, and the away form's obviously carried them through. I think they'll have learned a lot from last year, from going, they were up there all season in the Champions League spots, very, very similar to where they are now. And they tailed away at the end of the season and ended up missing out. So I think as a group, they'll have learned a lot from that. I think Rodgers has mentioned in the past that they've learned their lessons from that, and they're almost trying not to get too ahead of themselves and take one game at a time. But it's a difficult one to call because I just think, and you can agree with me or disagree with me on this, I'm not sure there's a more boring team to watch in the Premier League than Arsenal at the minute.
I don't know what their identity is. I haven't seen an awful lot of them, but the games I've seen, I get what you're saying. It's kind of like they wouldn't inspire you.
I don't have a Premier League team, so there's no allegiances here for me. But Arsenal were always one of the teams that I used to love watching because you always knew what you were going to get with Arsenal. You might get some horrific defending and some dodgy goalkeeping, but you were going to have technically very sound players who passed the ball on the deck. It was a quick movement, passing, nice football. Now it's like you say, without an identity, there's no clear way of breaking the opposition down, to saying that no team in the top half has managed fewer goals than Arsenal this season.
Yeah.
You can't put together a top 4 challenge if you're not scoring enough goals, and that is not scoring enough goals to put together a top 4 challenge. But then on the flip side to that, only Man City have conceded fewer goals. Man City and Chelsea have conceded fewer goals than Arsenal this season. So what Arteta has done is very anti-Arsenal in a sense. The defence looks rather solid, and they're almost missing something going forward. And it's a shame because, like I said, and everyone used to love watching Arsenal. Even Spurs fans might admit that there has been some good Arsenal teams to watch down the years. So it is a shame, but I do think that Leicester have got the upper hand in this one. I think they're in better form. I think, to be honest, they've got a better squad. Would you not agree?
Yeah, I've just been very impressed with them. And really impressed with Vardy at his age. He's such a threat. Even in the Liverpool game, they go behind, they end up winning well, and they've just kept their consistency. And Vardy's actually a 9-1 shot to be top scorer. This just brings me on to the Leeds Villa game, because this market isn't entirely kind of set in stone yet. You have Mohamed Salah's 8-11. Harry Kane is 13-2. Bruno Fernandes 6-1. I'm actually looking for a price here, and I'm struggling.
What about
Patrick Bamford was who I was looking for. So Patrick Bamford, the would-be Ireland striker, obviously could declare for Ireland, but unfortunately for us hasn't. He's on 13 goals and he's in flying form at the moment. 5 assists, which is actually more than Salah. Salah has 17 goals and 3 assists, which is totally out of kilter with everyone else. He just doesn't really do assists. Salah just scores. He was my tip at the start of the season. But the boy Vardy is now up to 12, and he's a 20-1 shot. He will need to probably get a 1 or 2 against Villa to keep you alive there, or keep you kind of hopeful. But I quite like Leeds there. I think without the man Grealish, I think Leeds should win this. They're 13-10 to beat Villa, which will be a key game for me and my mate in that match bet.
Yeah, I'd take them at 13-10. I watched Leeds against Southampton last night. They obviously won 3-1, and they were very impressive. Bamford in particular. I think the difference between Bamford and Salah, it was almost strange because with Salah being a winger and Bamford being a number 9, is that Salah is almost the last man in the attack on most Liverpool's attack. He's the person they're trying to get on the end of the attacks. And Bamford is his hold-up play is so integral to the way they attack that he finds himself in a position where it's either he could shoot or maybe he could lay it on for a teammate. And I think that's kind of where his involvement in terms of more assists comes from. But I think 13-10 Leeds. They played really well. Also, Rafinha, the wing, I thought he was outstanding last night. He looks like, I think they bought him for £14 million or something in the summer, and he looks like a potential 50-60 million pound player that some of the top teams in Europe could be after. He's 2-footed, he dribbles, he's good on set pieces, technically brilliant. He picks out players in the box. He's not, I think sometimes with wingers, you get you kind of wingers who they put crosses into the box and they sort of hope that it ends up in an area that someone can attack. But Rafinha picks out his man, he picks out a ball.
It's an art as well, and it's kind of like a big part of the modern game as well, and you can see it a lot with Man City. It's these players coming in, making runs at the edge of the box, and it's very, very hard for defensive midfielders and centre-backs are kind of at 6s and 7s to pick that up, and I think it's something that, the good teams do really well.
Yeah, it's that like position of maximum opportunity, really, like not quite in the 6-yard box, so in between the 6-yard box and the
edge of the D. Exactly.
Really. Getting. And
we sound like footballers here, Adam.
I know it sounds like we know what we're talking about, Johnny.
And that's why you're a Bolton fan and I'm a Galway United fan. It's interesting actually to just look at the BBC's top scorers, because Calvin Lewin has 13 goals and 0 assists, which is an incredible record, really. So Salah may not be the worst. I think that's it, Adam. Is it, or anything else before we go?
Let me give some selections on the Leicester-Arsenal game.
Yep.
I think it's an interesting one. We obviously mentioned James Maddison. He's in good form, scored at the weekend. And we obviously talked about Jamie Vardy and his potential quest for a golden boot. So Vardy and Maddison both to score. Very interesting. 10-1. I think that's a good price for them both to score. Just Vardy to score and Leicester to win. That's 5-2 with Star Sports. I think that's particularly solid. Vardy's got a great record against Arsenal. I think he scored more goals against Arsenal than any other Premier League team. I might be wrong on that. It just came to my head then. So feel free to let me know. But last one on that game, I'll go both teams to score. Both teams not to score, and Leicester to win by 2 goals. So essentially a 2-0 win to Leicester at 21-2.
And before we finish up, time to mention the Trader Challenge. Just looking at it here, we're in a situation where Revs is winning the head-to-head 5-2 with 1 draw. So basically, Rory has a hell of a lot of work to do. And this week's games are West Brom, Brighton, Leeds, Villa, Newcastle, Wolves, Leicester, Arsenal, Spurs, Burnley, Chelsea, Man U.
Yeah, it's a great pick. Just a reminder that it's completely free to play. And all you've got to do is to win a £10 free bet. All you've got to do is beat one of our traders, the Revs or Rory, with their selections. And for a £200 free bet, you just need to be the best entry. So if you can get 3 or 4 correct, you've got every chance of landing yourself a £200 free bet with Star Sports. Should we go through them one by one, Johnny? Do you fancy?
Fire ahead.
I'm having this West Brom against Brighton. Screams 0-0 to me. So I'm having 0-0 in that one. Leeds against...
don't think that's much good to West Brom. So we'll go for 1-0 Brighton.
You're having 1-0 Brighton. I'm having 0-0. Leeds against Villa. I think 3-1 is a fair... 3-1 is a fairly good suggestion. Yeah,
I'll with you on that. 3-1. It's going to be comfortable but goal-laden.
Newcastle against Wolves. I'm not sure this one screams goals to me either. So I'm thinking maybe a 1-0 Wolves. Or
1-0 Wolves.
Either way, round a 1-0 I could see, to be honest. But yeah, I'll go 1-0 Wolves.
I'm actually going to go for 1-1 in Leicester and Villa. Leicester and Arsenal, rather. 1-1.
I've just tipped up 2-0, so I'm going to stick with 2-0 to Leicester on that one. Spurs against Burnley was probably the toughest one for me. I've just got no idea.
Spurs at all.
They're both just so hot and cold, so it's hard to know which team's going to turn up. But I think if Spurs
Burnley, bit of an outside bet.
I'm gonna reverse that. I'm gonna go 2-1 Spurs.
Chelsea, Man U. Your final word.
I'm sticking with 1-1 as we've just discussed on that one.
I'll go with 1-1 as well. So yeah, a bit of unity between Adam and I. Check out the Beat the Trader Challenge for a chance to win a free £200 bet, or a much easier chance just to win a free £10 bet. Thanks a million, Adam, and that was the 2-man wall for this week. Keep an eye out on that Celtic market, see if the money does come for Eddie Howe, or for Roy Keane, or for Rafa Benitez, or for Lampard, or for some of the other big names. And we shall talk to you next week.
Thanks, Johnny.